Hi, we're the Pink Pandas, and this is our Milestones of Diversity in American Education project. I'm Jess.
I'm Ashley. And I'm Michelle.
I picked the milestone of the Massachusetts Law of 1647 for the 17th century because this was our nation's very first step towards public schooling. This law helps set the basis for what our schooling is today, and I believe it was really important part of our nation's history and their educational history as well. Before I begin, here's some background information about what I will be talking about. Before the Massachusetts Law of 1647, the Massachusetts Law of 1642 was enacted. This law stated that parents or masters of children were responsible for their children's education. At this point in history, there was no formal schooling, and children were being educated very little. So, the law of 1642 was enacted with the concept of if citizens could read the laws, they would abide them. However, unfortunately, many parents and masters neglected their duties of educating their children, and that's when the law of 1647 was enacted 5 years later. Who was involved and affected by this event? The Massachusetts Law of 1647 was enacted by the colonists of New England because they had visions of educational progression. The Governor and Company of Massachusetts Bay passed this law, which in turn had a large effect on the Puritan families. With this law in place, children received proper education they needed, and parents were relieved from the stress and duties of educating their children. What was the event, and what was expected to change as a result of this event? The Massachusetts Law of 1647 stated that towns of 50 or more people required a schoolmaster to be hired to teach reading and writing to the children, and towns of 100 or more needed a grammar school teacher to prepare children to attend colleges such as Harvard. When did this event take place, and is there any significance on the timing of this event? This law was enacted on November 11, 1647, and this also occurred after the Massachusetts Law of 1642. This law was obviously enacted in Massachusetts, where the educational movement began. There is no real significance of the time or place, besides the fact that the Puritans were living here at the time and the education movement was prevalent. Why did this event take place? This event took place because parents neglected their duties to educate in 1642. The law of 1647 was put into place in order to guarantee child education for all to help better society. The artifact I chose for the Massachusetts Law of 1647 was the Hornbook. This was given to each student and was recited each day in school. On it is the alphabet and a prayer. The purpose of reciting this prayer was to hopefully throw away Satan's trickery with scripture reading.
For the 18th century, I picked women's education. I picked the Young Ladies Academy since it was the first all-girls academy and set a huge example for other schools to open for only women, and it was a big accomplishment towards women's education. Some background information was before this academy, most women had little to no education and would only be taught the basic household skills, while the boys would receive the higher education instead. Who was involved and affected in this event? Women were mostly affected by this event since for the first time they were offered a chance at higher education, thanks to the founder John Poor. What was this event? What was expected to change as a result of this event? Did things change? This event was a huge accomplishment and great opportunity for women. It showed that women were capable of receiving a higher education, and as a result, many more schools opened for women in the late 1700s and early 1800s. When did this event take place? Is there any significance on the timing of this event? The school opened in 1787, and they received over 100 applicants in the first year of women who wanted to attend. And this was a greater time for education for women, and the school was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Why did this event take place? What was going on before, during, and after the event took place? The academy opened because women were given more free time since the economy was starting to improve because of industrial production, so they could have more time to go to school. For my artifact, I picked a syllabus from the Young Ladies Academy since syllabus show what you're going to be taught, and for once they're taught more than basic household jobs. For the 19th century, I picked the Common School movement, and I picked this movement because it gave everyone an equal opportunity for education and gave us the modern-day public school. Some background information on this was before this event, Everyone had a different amount of schooling, and because many could not afford the price of schools and the conditions in schools were really bad back then. So it was only for the wealthy who could afford nice schools. Who was involved and affected by this event? Horace Mann was called the father of the common school movement and would ride horseback to schools to inspect them. He was greatly supported by Thomas Jefferson, and this helped students receive a free education so they all could get schooling. What was the event? What was expected to change as a result of the event, and did things change? The Common School movement was a free elementary education accessible to everyone and financed by public funds and established school attendance laws. It made it so everyone can get an education regardless of their social class. When did this event take place? Is there any significance on the timing of this event? Also, where did this event take place? Is there any significance on where this event took place? The event took place in the 1830s to 1840s, where Mann joined the Massachusetts Senate and became the Secretary of State for the Board of Education. It started in the northern states in Massachusetts, and that's where Horace Mann was from. Why did this event take place? What was going on before, during, and after this event took place? The movement took place since many children did not attend school or receive a good education, since many could not afford schooling and schools were in bad condition, so many children didn't want to go to school. Instead, they would rather work in factories than attend school. For my artifact, I picked chairs with backs because when Horace Mann was trying to improve the conditions in school, one of the things he wanted all schools to have were chairs with backs.
I had the 20th century, and for this I chose Little Rock 9. I chose this event because it was really one of the major events that led to the desegregation of schools. It took place in the 1950s, which was a time of great conflict between black and white people in America. This time was also known as the Civil Rights Movement. There were two cases that really led up to Little Rock 9. The first one was Plessy versus Ferguson, which created the legal standings for segregation under the doctrine of separate but equal, and also the Brown versus Board of Education, which created the desegregation of schools, and at this time people were fighting over the desegregation of schools all over the country. Who was involved and affected by this event? This event involved President Dwight D. Eisenhower, Daisy Bates, who was the local leader of the NAACP in Little Rock, 9 African American students, more specifically Elizabeth Eckford, who I'll talk about later on, and Arkansas Governor Orval Faubus. What was the event? What was expected to change as a result of this event? Did things change? This event involved 9 African American students that tried to desegregate Little Rock Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas. This was organized by Daisy Bates. The students tried to enter the school but were blocked by white mobs and the National Guard that were placed there by Governor Orval Faubus. A different day, the students tried to re-enter the school, and Daisy Bates called each student to get them to try and enter together. However, she could not reach Elizabeth Eckford, and she ended up trying to walk to school alone, only to be yelled at by white mobs and spit on. The students continued to try to enter the school unsuccessfully until eventually President Eisenhower ordered federal troops to assist the students and allow them to finally enter the school. When did this event take place? Is there any significance on the timing of this event? This event took place in 1957. The significance of this time was that it was during the Civil Rights Movement, which was a major time for black rights in America. Where did this event take place? Is there any significance on where this event took place? The event took place in Little Rock, Arkansas, which was in the South, which was the most racist part of the country and where there were the most conflicts. And that there is a picture of Little Rock Central High. Why did this event take place? What was going on before, during, and after this event took place? The event took place because African American citizens wanted to integrate schools, and before and after this event was the Civil Rights Movement, and after the event a lot of major steps were took, and finally schools were desegregated. And my artifact for Little Rock 9 was this picture of Elizabeth Eckford trying to get to school with the white mob yelling at her, and this quote, "I tried to see a friendly face somewhere in the mob, someone who maybe would help me. I looked into the face of an old woman and it seemed a kind face, but when I looked at her again, she spat on me." I chose these artifacts because I think that they really show just how cruel people were at the time and just how tough it was for African Americans. For the 21st century, I chose the No Child Left Behind Act, and I chose this because it really has a lot to do with how education in schools is today. The No Child Left Behind Act is the most recent iteration of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. which was enacted by the Johnson administration as part of their war on poverty. The goal of this was to improve educational equity for students from lower income families by providing federal funds to school districts serving poor students. The 1944 reauthorization, the Improving America's Schools Act, put in place key standards and accountability elements for states and local school districts that receive funding under the law, and this really led to the No Child Left Behind Act. Who was involved and affected by this event? The Johnson administration created the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The Clinton administration put in place the Improving America's Schools Act. George W. Bush actually signed the No Child Left Behind Act, and the Obama administration most recently reauthorized it, and this affects poor school children and minority students. What was the event? What was expected to change as a result of this event, and did things change? The purpose of this event was that it dramatically increased the role of federal government in guaranteeing the quality of education for all students. There are 4 pillars of the No Child Left Behind Act. The first pillar is accountability, and this means that schools must now provide more testing for their students to make sure that all students are reaching academic proficiency. There's also more choices for parents, so if schools are not living up to state standards, parents can do things such as transfer their children to new schools or get supplemental services such as tutoring. Also proven education methods, which means that the federal funds are geared towards education programs that are scientifically proven to work to help students achieve academic proficiency. And also more freedom for states and communities, which means that schools can use the federal funding for what they really feel that their district needs, such as better teachers and more supplemental services, so on and so forth. When did this event take place? Is there any significance on the timing of this event? The No Child Left Behind Act was created in 2001 but wasn't signed until January 8, 2002. Where did this event take place? Is there any significance on where this event took place? The No Child Left Behind Act was signed in Hamilton High School in Hamilton, Ohio. George Bush really felt it be appropriate for it to sign there because it really affected schools, and those are the people that were being affected by the act. And more specifically, Hamilton High School because it was the home of Chairman John Boehner, who that was his hometown, and he really had a lot to do with the act. Why did this event take place? What was going on before, during, and after this event took place? They created this act to try and close achievement gaps between poor minority students because students in more poor school districts were not being given the same opportunities as students from regular districts. And by providing more federal funding, now all students have the same opportunities. And for my artifact, I chose this picture of George Bush signing the act in Hamilton High School. And I really like this artifact because it shows the students, it shows teachers, it shows George Bush, and it really just brings it all together.
What I learned from creating this project is that public education system has changed in a large way from the 17th century to now. We went from having all children being homeschooled to having one teacher for some 40 plus children, and now where we have smaller classrooms with specialized subjects. Without the Massachusetts Law of 1647, we could possibly have an entirely different educational system. This shows how important education is now and how it was then, since people were thinking about it in the 17th century and trying to make a change for progression.
Doing this project, I learned that education has drastically changed since everyone attends school, no matter your gender or your social class, and that education keeps evolving and until the education can fit everyone's needs and everyone will get an opportunity to have education.
While creating this project, I really learned how much education in society has changed and is always changing. I think back to Little Rock 9 and how crazy of an event that seems today, but if you really look at it, it was only less than 60 years ago. I also learned that government interference with education is not always a bad thing. I always had a really bad view on standardized testing and government interference, but now that I see why it's actually put there, I'm more open-minded towards it.
Here is our list of references that we used throughout the project.